Trump heads to Georgia to meet some of the victims of the hurricane. Donald Trump dials up anti-immigration rhetoric in Wisconsin. I will liberate Wisconsin, says Donald Trump as he slams Vice President Kamala Harris. All eyes on the first vice presidential debate that will take place on the 1st of October. Kamala Harris pushes for a second presidential debate and remains to be seen whether that will actually happen. All right, a quick update coming in as far as the latest in the race to the White House after Hurricane Helene ravaged roughly 6 states in the United States. Vice President Kamala Harris cancelled all her campaign events and is set to return back to Washington from Las Vegas for a briefing on the kind of response that has come in from the government on the hurricane, which has so far killed, in fact, some reports seem to suggest that the total number could be as high as 100. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump is scheduled to visit Georgia and set to visit communities that have been heavily impacted by the hurricane. In recent rallies, former President Trump has escalated his personal attacks on his rival, the Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris. In fact, calling her mentally impaired while she was also saying she should be impeached and prosecuted. The big event of this week, of course, is the vice presidential debate between the two vice presidential nominees, Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump's running mates are all set for the big showdown. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance are preparing for the highly anticipated debate that is scheduled to take place on the 1st of October on CBS. All right, in fact, let's now take a look and focus on the first big debate that we are having today on the show, which is around well, the latest as far as the politics surrounding hurricane. Now, this has been a very devastating hurricane that has hit US, but there's been enough and more politics that's taking place on both sides. To tell our viewers before I get in the guests this evening, well, the death toll, as I said, has crossed 100. Donald Trump has also made remarks saying that you will be okay, remarks that have actually sparked huge controversy. And even as there's been some reports suggesting that Project 2025, which Democrats have linked to the Trump campaign, says and talks at length about privatizing some of those weather outfits as well and weather agencies. Where does this take the campaign and the election with just 4 weeks to go? That's the big discussion. Ajay Paturia joins me on the broadcast, representing the big Democrat voice on the show. And we also have Matt Klink, who's a Republican strategist. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking out the time speaking to me. This is unfortunate. People have lost their lives. Livelihoods have been lost. Houses have been devastated. Communities have been ravaged. And what I see here is a lot of politics playing over people's misery. Let me take that as and give both of you the opportunity to respond to that. Let's start with you, Ajay. How do you react and how the Democrats have reacted so far in terms of some of the messaging that has come in from the Trump campaign? Your first remarks on that.
The messaging related to the immigration?
No, I'm asking about the hurricane issue on which Donald Trump commented saying that you'll be okay, and there was a very sharp retort that came in from the Democrats.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the response of President Biden and the Vice President Harris, they have been providing all the resources which are needed to support the hurricane, and the administration is working on the clock to support that. But if you look at when Trump was in the power, he refused to provide support to California fires, and he basically restricted the support out there. But this administration, President Biden and Vice President Harris are president for all Americans, and they are doing all that can be done. Definitely, it's a very difficult situation for people who are living out there. But this is not the time to play politics on this. This is the time to support and get all the resources needed so that some of the lives of people's lives can be eased and they can get the resources they need.
Matt, come in there. What the Democrats are saying that, elections will keep happening, we'll keep campaigning, but this is people's misery on which maybe political statements can be avoided.
Well, look, I mean, the last response just proves that the Democrats are injecting politics into this. I will add that in all of this, Kamala Harris didn't stop her campaigning. Joe Biden, because he's mentally addled, was on some beach in Delaware somewhere, not doing anything. And Donald Trump is going to do what a commander-in-chief should do. He's going to be on the ground in Valdosta, Georgia today, offering support. And letting people know that as much as this tragedy did occur, that things are going to be okay. But this is just a classic example of, who is actually leading our country right now. And right now, it certainly is not Joe Biden. And Kamala Harris is off campaigning. So they need someone to step into that void. And Donald Trump will be in Valdosta, Georgia today to demonstrate that he does care about the people and that things will ultimately be okay. Hurricanes do hit with regularity in that part of the world, and they want someone on the ground to support them.
Ajay, respond to that. Here is a presidential campaign that is taking place, and one of the candidates is well within his rights to question government's response. What he felt was inadequate, and therefore he stepped in.
Well, unfortunately, Trump is running out of real issues to talk about. So he has to come to this, to talk about in the campaign. But let me tell you, there has been hurricanes over the years and years every year. And there's a very established FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Response System Organization, and which immediately jumps in, whether it was fires in Hawaii or whether it's a hurricane over here or hurricane in other parts of Florida. FEMA is the agency which immediately jumps in, and President Biden and the administration people and Vice President Harris has been in touch with the right team of people who are working on it, and they're getting daily reports, and the White House is closely monitoring it. So, and it's more welcome. I mean, if President Trump also wants to visit it, it's always good so that leaders from both sides meet the people and get the issues, what is important, where the help is needed, and relate to the agencies. So it's all good. I mean, there's nothing wrong in anybody visiting over there.
Okay. Matt, respond to the fact that the Project 25 issue has been raised again by the Democrats, and they've said that it very clearly states that under that there is a provision for privatization of weather companies, essentially saying that such climate-induced disasters would be harder to identify and predict and impair the response of the government.
Well, you're again, the Trump administration had nothing, or Donald Trump had nothing to do with Project 2025. That was created by the Heritage Foundation. He said all along that he doesn't support it, yet the news media and Democrats still beat that drum. So look, irrespective of what Project 2025 said, Donald Trump has demonstrated that he is going to go into any part of the country where he thinks that he can reach voters and impact them. Now, it is always unfortunate, and I do agree with what my fellow guest said, that it is well within the right of both presidential campaigns to go into any part of the country to not only talk to voters, but also to lend support. And that's what Donald Trump is going to do. So, I mean, you can beat the Project 2025 drum, but we have a saying in America, particularly in the South, that dog won't hunt. It's not related to the Trump campaign. And as much as Democrats would like it to be, it's kind of fallen flat at this point.
So fair enough. Maybe, Project 2025 is an issue that's being raised by the Democrats to probably deflect from the real issue. But then the question that is coming by and being raised by a lot of Americans is that this is a time where probably some unity could be displayed by the two candidates because it is people's misery. 100 people have lost their lives. Do you think this is a time to probably build those bridges and then politics could start once again once some of this issue has been addressed?
Well, Americans can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think that, Donald Trump is all for bringing people together. He has a very strong base of support. And Again, contrary to what my guest said most recently, the issue set that's being discussed right now, particularly the failed economy, the misery of Bidenomics and Biden-Harrisnomics over the last 4 years, coupled with an immigration system that is out of control, is very favorable for Donald Trump, and that's why he is performing so strongly in the 7 swing states that are ultimately going to matter for this election.
Okay, very quickly, Ajay, I'll give you a chance to respond to some of what Matt's commentary has been around the fact that, you keep flagging the Project 2025 issue simply because you're deflecting from the real issues that matter.
I will tell you that the Project 2025 proposes, which is close people associated with Trump who has been proposing 2025. It says the entire federal bureaucracy, including independent agencies such as Department of Justice, be placed under direct presidential control. And that proposes executive theory. It says that to remove several broad FBI agencies and people depending from agencies. It talks about eliminating job protection for thousands of government employees who can then be replaced by political appointees. And Trump has clearly said that he's going to put on, and so on, removing education department. And so this is something which is talking about, being an autocrat from day one and threat to a democracy.
Okay, so Matt is saying this is the deflection. This is the deflection what he was speaking about earlier. Okay, so I think in about 4 weeks' time, a little over 4 weeks, we will know what really the answer of the American electorate is, which side is it leading on, and which of the arguments it's actually buying. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and speaking to me on US election watch. Shifting gears now to the other big story, and in fact, one of the biggest themes that really are having a huge impact on what the election is all about. US election 2024 is incomplete till we mention immigration, one of the 3 key issues on which this election is essentially being fought on. And some of the data that former President Donald Trump shared regarding immigrants and crime, linking them, is incorrect. In fact, Donald Trump seems to be promoting a fair bit of rhetoric as far as immigration is concerned, and this was in Wisconsin where he had held his latest rally, and he's also slammed his opponent, Kamala Harris, with some very strong remarks. But what really is the on-ground story? How important is illegal immigration? Does it really matter in border states, and could it become the deciding factor? Can Kamala Harris bridge the gap between her and Donald Trump on the key issue of immigration? That's exactly what we will be discussing today. But before that, take a look at this report that tells you exactly why this is one of the central themes of this election.
Another one because she got beaten tonight, but I don't know.
In there, was she successful?
Okay, so some of the numbers, let me just put that out, and then we also get in Anjana Shankar, who's a senior journalist of the national newspaper based in Abu Dhabi. She was in some of these border states, and she's going to give us a sense of how important or critical these areas, these states could be in deciding the winner. Okay, Anjana Shankar joins me, and I'm going to keep coming putting out those information, whether it is about the arrest rate, the immigrants, the undocumented immigrants, all of that numbers we'll keep putting out. But Anjana, my first question to you is that, you've been at some of these border states, you've witnessed some of that issue firsthand. Talk to us about the scale of this issue and how big a bearing it could have in these elections.
Yeah, thank you for having me. On the onset, I would like to say that with all the debates that we are having around the issue of immigration, all the political tit for tat that we see between Kamala Harris and Trump, all the vitriolic which is associated with the issue of immigration, especially from the Trump camp, as somebody who was there, as you said, when you see the issue up close, it's nothing like what we see in these debates. Because what you see there at the border are hundreds and thousands of humans. When you interact with them, the stories are really heartrending. So no matter what the political divide is about the issue of immigration, these people keep coming because they are fleeing from violence. They are looking for a better life in another country. They are leaving their homeland, and we're talking about women, sometimes pregnant women, families, men. They're all taking this very dangerous trip across the desert, across Mexico and the Darien Gap, coming through to the U.S. borders to secure a life. So that is the reality that you see there. And when you talk to people, what struck me was all these conversations about drug mafia coming through, people who are invading the U.S., people who are dangerous to the U.S., rapists, drug lords. I did not personally see any of that. These are people who desperately cross and wait for the border patrol to take their names, register them, and let them free so that they can start a new life.
So I want to ask you two questions. I get it. What you're saying is you talk about the human misery aspect of it, the human angle of some of these people who want to cross the border. But the other side to it is, and which is what the essential issue is. I mean, one can debate and have a discussion about, how much of what Donald Trump says is factually correct or not. But the fact that the southern states of America are witnessing a huge influx of people coming in is a matter of great concern. I'm not saying this, several polls are saying this, which is why Donald Trump leads Kamala Harris on immigration issue. The question I want to ask you is, did you feel that with the electorate you spoke to the undocumented people who want to come to the US, but what about some of those people who will be voting in the elections on 5th of November? Do they feel this as a major issue?
Yeah, definitely, no doubt. Immigration, especially in this election, it has always been a major issue, political issue in the US, but definitely for this election, it has become the most important issue for the US electorate. One of the reasons is the sheer scale of migrants that have come in. You're talking about around 1.8 million asylum seekers in 2023. And that number, when you pit it against previous year's numbers, the pre-COVID numbers, this is a massive rise. And the diversity of people of different nationalities that are coming from, Chinese, Afghans, not just South Americans, there are Indians, there are a lot of them coming in. So a big issue for the electorate is definitely the question whether this kind of tidal wave of migrants that are coming in, is that going to impact the resources of different states? And it is, various states have spoken about, how offering shelter, free health care and housing for these migrants have affected their resources. And for example, some of these border states in 2020, end of 2023, 2024, they have adopted this busing of migrants, which is quite new in the US. When I was there recently, border states like Texas are busing hundreds and thousands of migrants into more so-called liberal states, sanctuary states like New York, Massachusetts, to send these migrants so that they will offer them housing. So it's like a tit for tat move. So what they're saying is, you have an open door policy for migrants. You're saying that let's welcome these migrants. Okay, you take them. So they're giving money and they're putting migrants on the bus and sending them, truckloads of them, into these liberal states. And for example, in the Logan International Airport in Boston, there were hundreds of migrants who were sleeping at the airport. Most of the shelters that governments provides were overflowing. So there is definitely a problem of states struggling to meet the financial burden of these migrants, a tidal wave of migrants coming into the U.S. So it's definitely an issue for the electorate.
Okay, so yes, it's a major issue, and the latest polls, I'm talking about the latest Pew research that has come in, says that 6 out of 10 Americans rate immigration as very important in determining who they will vote for. And some of the other polls suggest that they prefer Trump, they trust Trump to handle the issue more effectively than Kamala Harris. I'm not getting into some of the other details and the vitriolic campaign on both sides, but this is the latest poll that has come in. The question I'm asking is that what do you think is the political divide on this issue like? There is of course entrenched positions, but you spoke to a lot of people. Talk to us about the political divide on something as big as this issue.
Yeah, what you said is right. That's exactly what we saw. There are people on two extremes. So no matter what the debates are, no matter what the facts that you put out, they are going to hold on to their sides. There are extreme supporters, people who believe that immigration should be looked upon as a humanitarian issue, there should be a humane approach to immigration. And there is on the other side of the divide people who attack migrants. They demonize migrants as people who are invading the U.S. illegally. But in between, people who are sitting on the fence, those are the people who are questioning what are the policies, what are these two candidates putting on the table. Where should we vote depending on what are they talking about when it comes to addressing the political issue. So one major concern that a lot of common people who are neither on the extremes are looking at is there is a consensus among people that no country can have an open border. You cannot just leave the border open and have, hundreds and thousands of people just walk in without any kind of, control. So there is definitely an agreement that you need to secure the border. Yes. But at the same time, people know that some people don't admit it, but people know that the immigration system, the asylum system in the U.S.
needs to be revisited.
It is broken.
All right.
And the very fact that there is more than 1 million cases of asylum cases pending within these asylum courts is proof that, the system has to, they have to mend the system if they want to streamline the process.
All right, Anjana, thank you so much for taking out the time, explaining to us in detail about an issue that is likely to decide the future course of the US election. In fact, more news coming in. Well, as I said, one of the biggest issues and events this week is going to be the big vice presidential face-off between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. This is they're going to go head-to-head in a CBS vice presidential debate that will take place on the 1st of October. In fact, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz face contrasting pressures in the highly anticipated debate. To be fair, they're both Midwesterners, and this is essentially going to be the last debate before the 5th of November elections, because Donald Trump has rejected all efforts by the Democrat Party to have one more round of debate with Kamala Harris. So this is essentially going to be the last debate of this election. All right. Shifting focus now to the latest as far as Pennsylvania is concerned. It's, remember, the most crucial swing state, 19 electoral college votes it accounts for. Remains to be seen who will win, whether it's going to be Kamala Harris, who could actually win over Pennsylvania. It is said to be the toughest for Democrats. And Harris leads Trump in several swing states, but Pennsylvania possibly holds the key to the White House. Take a look at this report.
One of the most important states in the race to the White House is Pennsylvania. The last time Joe Biden won the state by just over 1% and went on to win the election. Biden was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and his local ties, cultural roots helped him secure victory in 2020. Biden outpaced Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign and cruised to victory. With Kamala Harris on the Democratic ticket now, the game has changed, as her chances of winning in the region look dicey. It's not just the loss of Biden as the candidate that worries local Democrats. Harris, who is a Californian and spearheaded the party's post-Dobbs abortion messaging, make for an awkward fit in a closely watched region that's historically been a center of anti-abortion activity. Biden represents an older version of the party that was closely tied to organized labor and focused on economic issues that was perceived as a force against the party's progressive side. As opposed to her past tours in the state, Harris is now aiming to make inroads outside major metropolitans, targeting the middle-class working people. There are some positives for Harris to look at. According to a recent Franklin and Marshall College poll, Harris leads Trump by 3 points in Pennsylvania. However, in the northeastern part of the state, Trump was comfortably ahead by 7% points. Harris has also narrowed Trump's lead among white Catholic voters according to EWTN Real Clear poll. However, it will mostly boil down to the issue of abortion, as many Democratic Party supporters believe that it is the main reason why Trump wins the white Catholic vote. Vishal Vivek reports for NDTV World Bureau Report.
With that, it's a wrap. Thanks so much for watching.
Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, terrorism has no place in our world is what Prime Minister Modi has told the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a short while ago. This as the situation in West Asia escalates. The Prime Minister's message comes at a time when Israel continues to strike Beirut in Lebanon, Syria and Yemen, what many say is a huge escalation of the crisis in West Asia. Israel seems bent on the elimination of the Hezbollah, the terror group supported by Iran. But while the top leadership of the group has indeed been eliminated, is there a second or third tier leadership that may take charge? That situation now is getting absolutely critical. There have been attacks in Syria, apparently by the US also involved over there. 37 militants have been killed in Syria. That's just one aspect of the news. We'll be looking at it all with wonderful experts from around the world. Is this now an all-out war, what we'd all really been worried about? Also on the program tonight, are you tired of those pesky telecallers, spammers, irritants who call you, waste your time and potentially scam you as well? Well, you clearly are not alone. Now the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, the TRAI, is cracking the whip by systemically getting rid of spammers. TRAI, remember, a month back, issued a directive instructing all access providers to block any traffic containing URLs or over the OTT links that have not been whitelisted. In other words, those which have not been allowed for use are banned. So how is it all going to work? We've heard this all before. Getting rid of these callers, these pesky callers, is it going to change our lives? Think about it. It is such a hindrance that we are discussing this as a major topic on the 9 p.m. news on Left, Right and Centre. The headlines at this hour first. The ED books Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah in the alleged Mysuru Urban Development Authority land scam. The case was filed after the Enforcement Directorate took note of an FIR filed by the orders of the Lokayog. The battle for Haryana enters the slogovers. Congress leaders Rahul and Priyanka Gandhi begin their yatra in the poll-bound state. Mallikarjun Kharge and Rajnath Singh entwined in a war of words. Both parties put up united fronts to fight rift speculations. The Maharashtra government gives a new status to the cow, ruling that the animal will now be called Rajya Mata or Mother. The Eknath Shinde government says the declaration in the poll-bound state is related to cultural importance. The Supreme Court comes to the rescue of a scheduled caste student who defaulted on his IIT Dhanbad fee, just couldn't pay. The court ordered his admission, saying that young talent cannot be allowed to go away. Well, terrorism has no place in our world is what the Prime Minister Narendra Modi told the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a short while back. This comes at a time when the situation in West Asia appears to be escalating. That situation increasingly getting out of hand. I'm going to go through what the Prime Minister said. He said he spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu about recent developments in West Asia. Terrorism has no place in our world. It's crucial to prevent regional escalation and ensure the safe release of all hostages. India is committed to supporting efforts for an early restoration of peace and stability.
As Israel continues with its aerial strike in Lebanon, it has now hinted for a full ground invasion in its neighborhood. The Defense Minister of Israel visited the northern border and encouraged its ground forces to thwart any attempt for Hezbollah.
אני אומר כאן לאנשי המילואים ולאנשי הסדיר. כל מה שצריך לעשות, נעשה. המטרה שלנו זה להחזיר את תושבי הצפון לבתיהם. עבור החזרת תושבי הצפון לבתים שלהם, אנחנו נהיה מוכנים לעשות כל מאמץ. זו המשימה שלכם, זו המשימה של צה"ל, וזה מה שנעשה, ונפעיל את כל מה שצריך. את הכוחות שלכם, כוחות אחרים, מהאוויר, מהים וגם מהיבשה.
Meanwhile, Hezbollah, which has suffered maximum damage in the last 1 week, besides the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, chose its deputy chief Sheikh Qasim to address its supporters. This was the first visual appearance of a Hezbollah leader after the killing of Hassan Nasrallah.
نحن نعلم أن المعركة قد تكون طويلة والخيارات مفتوحة أمامنا. سنواجه أي احتمال ومستعدون إذا قرر الإسرائيلي أن يدخل بريا قوات المقاومة جاهزة للالتحام البري.
But Hezbollah's key supporter, Iran, doesn't seem to be interested in escalating the situation with Israel.
ما اگر شرایط اقتضا بکند و اگر زمان آن برسد الی بیت المقدس رو تا خود بیت المقدس ادامه خواهیم داد.
The situation in Lebanon remains dire as thousands have been left homeless and some have even entered into Syria, forcing the caretaker Prime Minister of Lebanon to say that he is ready to accept immediate ceasefire.
نحن كلبنان كحكومة وبعد اتصالي والموافقة مع الرئيس بري نؤكد على تعهدنا بتطبيق ما توصل إليه كل النقاط التي وردت في البيان، ومنها وقف إطلاق النار فورا من أجل بداية البحث بتطبيق 1901 كاملا، وهذا هو المهم بكل حذافير ما هذا ورد بالبيان، فنحن نقبل به ونرحب به ونتعهد بتطبيقه فورا. هذا موقف اللبناني الأساسي والرسمي الذي أعلنته ببيان صدر في حينها. أرحب بالنداء الذي صدر، واليوم بعد اجتماعي مع الرئيس بري أؤكد مجددا على موافقتنا على هذا.
Iran has hinted that perhaps it will not retaliate immediately, and Hezbollah has still to choose a successor in Lebanon. And meanwhile, the international community is begging Israel to accept a ceasefire and not escalate the situation on its northern border. Amid all this, the bigger question is that whether Israel will accept ceasefire or will have its way and get into the ground invasion of Lebanon. In Delhi, Mohammad Ghazali for NDTV.
Well, joining us now, a very special guest, Ravi Agarwal, the Editor-in-Chief of Foreign Policy. Ravi, thanks very much for being with us. It's quite clear that Israel is intent on eliminating the leadership of Hamas and, of course, Hezbollah now. They've eliminated already many of the top leaders of Hezbollah. But do we know whether there is a tier 2, a tier 3, a tier 4 in place? In other words, is this a war, a battle that can go on indefinitely?
It certainly can. I mean, Israel has been trying to take out any form of leadership of Hamas and Hezbollah since October 7 of last year now. They've been going for whatever they can get. I think in the last couple of weeks, the main reason we've seen the escalations we've seen is the fact that Israel had, as we now know, bombs ready to go on pagers and walkie-talkies of key Hezbollah militia fighters. And it was forced to have those explode because it was worried that the intelligence around that was going to leak. That, of course, led to the escalation where we're at right now, where they needed to move quickly, having used up, one of their best forms of intelligence, one of their best preemptive strikes on Hezbollah, to then hit the group at a moment of immense weakness, take out its leadership. And that's what they're going to try to do in the coming days, potentially with a limited ground incursion to take out as many Hezbollah fighters as they can. Remember, they have long seen Hezbollah, which is much bigger, much more equipped than Hamas ever has been. They've seen it as a loaded gun pointed at them, funded by Iran, and they want to degrade it, especially leading up to the October 7 anniversary next week.
I must ask you, in this battle for eliminating terrorist leaders and leaders who don't work in Israel's interests, is the leadership in Iran in serious threat? I ask this because just 48 hours back, there were reports that the Iranian leader, Khamenei, had gone into hiding. I mean, is that as far as this might get?
I don't think so. I would be extremely surprised if there were to be a direct attack on the supreme leader of Iran or on Masoud Pezeshkian, the new president. Many of us who were in New York last week around the United Nations met some of the Iranian leaders who were in town. They have been quite consistent over the last few months that they're not looking for an escalation. They are, I think, a little bit surprised at the range and extent of how Israel has been able to take out its key proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah especially, but also the Houthis today. I think they're a little bit stunned on that front, but they don't want to act rashly. They don't see it as being in their advantage to act rashly. They want to hold on to the opportunity to attack and retaliate at a later date. And remember, underpinning all of this is the fact that the United States has considerable assets in the region right now, and they don't want to provoke the United States to get involved in a direct attack on Iran. So in many senses, Tehran sees this as a provocation. It sees this as a moment where it does not want to take the bait. It wants to wait out October 7. It wants to wait out potentially even an American election in November, and then reassess and see when it might want to retaliate at a moment of its own choosing.
You know, you were talking about the U.S. There's been an attack apparently by U.S. forces taking out 37 terrorists or eliminating 37 people in Syria as well. So, you know, you've got the attacks on Syria, the attacks on Beirut continue. We've seen Israel take out targets in Yemen as well. Is this now expanding beyond what we've seen in the past?
It has already. This is an expansion. But it has been expanding over the last few months. So in a sense, this shouldn't be a surprise. We have long worried about exactly this. The question in any escalation is, where does it stop? And we don't know the answer to that. And that is why you and I are having this discussion right now. This is why everyone is as worried as they are. Behind the scenes, not in the media, but behind the scenes, there are very senior level discussions going on about how to de-escalate, about how much is enough. And I think crucially, since October 7 until right now, the question has remained, who has leverage on Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, to advise him to step to sort of calm things down, to advise him that enough is enough when it comes to Gaza. America should have that leverage, given all of the help and support it has given Israel in the last year and over the years. But the consensus view has now been that America is really not able to shift Israeli policy, despite all the signs and reports that we've heard about the White House being upset at Bibi Netanyahu, that he is doing what he needs to do, armed and supported by the United States.
Ravi Agarwal, thanks very much for summarizing this situation. It is truly frightening at this stage. Thanks very much for sharing your thoughts. Joining us at this stage, I'm joined by Ambassador Virendra Gupta, also Dr. Swasti Rao, and Ray Locker, who's been tracking this very closely. Ray Locker, let me come to you first. You know, what I was discussing with, my last panelist, Ravi Agarwal, how does this end, and who gets Benjamin Netanyahu to accept that, look, you need to stop this because it's really spreading fast?
I'm not sure anybody gets Benjamin Netanyahu to stop doing what he's doing. Clearly he's winning right now, at least in his mind. I mean, taking out Nasrallah is a huge win for them. And now going after the Houthis and what's been happening with Hamas, I don't think anything gets him to stop in the near term. I think he's going to look at what's going to happen in the election and decide, well, I don't know what I'm going to do next.
Swasti Rao, how do you actually see, this playing out? Because there's a strong possibility of an Israeli ground offensive, perhaps not limited, perhaps something more substantive, just in the hours and days ahead. And that expands the scope of the conflict. Hezbollah is not Hamas. They're much more substantive militarily. Could we see a great deal more bloodshed, in the days ahead?
Hi, Vishnu. I would just like to sort of start with this very famous statement which was made by this, this very well-known scholar where, there was this very solemn kind of realization that today you see that the centrifugal forces are far stronger than centralizing ones. And what is happening in West Asia is definitely a case study for this kind of a dangerous fragmentation which is happening in the world. So that's the first thing. The other thing is about, can this escalate? It is already into escalation. I mean, if you remember last year in October when this Hamas had brutally attacked Israelis, in that music festival, you remember that everybody was playing out these scenarios. If you remember, most of these news debates were about, okay, what is the first case scenario, the other case, and the third case? And the third case was a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran. Mm-hmm. And now you see that it's very close to that. I mean, they have directly hit Nasrallah, who's been the major force behind Hezbollah. And everybody knows that Hezbollah is this outfit which is supported by Iran as a proxy. So I think we are already living in that escalation. So that's one realization that needs to dawn. The other thing is where it would stop. I don't think anybody has a clear answer to where it would stop, but obviously, coming from the Indian vantage point, would worry about how does it impact India and what kind of scenarios, would impact India. Sure. Of course, it is not in India's interest to see an escalation there. You see that we have excellent ties not only with Israel, stood for a two-state solution, although right now, as I speak to you, in the context of what is happening, this sounds extremely bookish and extremely, for the heck of it, kind of an argument that we stand for two-state solution. Yes, we do. That's our official position. But, of course, we would be very worried if there would... if the crude oil prices would start getting affected. So far, surprisingly, there's been this wonderful balance of demand and supply, and we have actually not seen the crude oil prices getting affected, contrary to what a lot of people thought. And in fact, one of the escalatory results that everybody was worried about.
Just hold that thought for a moment. We'll talk about oil perhaps later, but I wanted to go across to Ambassador Gupta. Just last week in New York, we had the Prime Minister meet Mahmoud Abbas, the president of Palestine, president of the state of Palestine. Today, just a little while back, he spoke to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, obviously, speaking to Mahmoud Abbas is not speaking to Hamas, so that's absolutely clear. At the same time, India continues to play this balancing game. The Prime Minister saying terrorism will not be accepted. At a time when Hezbollah, Israel is fighting Hezbollah, perhaps directly or indirectly referring to Hezbollah, which has not been a very direct reference by New Delhi earlier on as a terrorist entity, and yet balancing things out by speaking to the Palestinians as well. Could you try and explain to us what India's strategy right now is?
Well, India has always supported in principle Palestinian right to an independent state, and has made it very clear that India stands against all forms of terrorism. So I think to begin with, the genesis of the conflict in that October incident when a large terrorist attack was launched against Israel, and we have disavowedly, we have condemned it in no uncertain terms. So I think having said that, I share Ravi's assessment that it seems to me that this is not escalating into an all-out regional conflict, but it's already escalated to a very dangerous level, Vishnu. And I think the question that needs to be asked is whether military superiority can be leveraged into a long-term benefit. What is, after all, in Israel's interest? The genesis of the problem is the Palestinian conflict. And Israel wants, in the long term, security for its country, borders, and security for its people. And is that going to be achieved by Israel escalating the attacks on Lebanon, Hezbollah commanders? Agreed. A very large number of top leadership of Hezbollah has been eliminated using the real-time intelligence that Israel was able to gather. But many more will come up to take their places. Hezbollah, by any estimate, in fact, Hezbollah is supposed to have about 60,000 cadres in their fighting group. It's a very large fighting group, well-equipped, well-armored. And can they be silenced? Can they be completely...
That's a valid
question. From the available indication, it seems...
Let me take that to Ray Locker. Ray, can Iran be silenced at this stage by Iran?
No, I don't think they can. I mean, you can't kill your way out of this conflict. I mean, haven't we seen that over the last, 80 years? I mean, that region has been riven by war repeatedly. I mean, Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982. How well did that work out? They had to do it again in 2006. I mean, they've had troops there on and off for the last 42 years. So you can't do that. But Netanyahu seems to be willing to try to do that. And right now he's getting what he wants. But these people aren't going to forget about what happened. The Hezbollah supporters in Lebanon, there's a lot more of them where these ones came from. And they're just going to be motivated to go after Israel. I mean, Hezbollah is committed to eliminating Israel. So if you're a member of Hezbollah, you don't want Israel around. You're not looking for an accommodation and some other way to make your lives better in Lebanon. So really, Israel doesn't have many options long term. They can't keep killing everybody there, and they're dealing with a foe that doesn't want them to exist, period. So it's pretty intractable. Iran has to decide what's in its best interest. Do they want to keep supporting these groups that are going nowhere? Meanwhile, you know, their quality of life has been steadily degraded by sanctions and their own government's incompetence.
Swasti, the other factor, of course, is Yemen in all of this, and Iran continues to arm Yemen. They've had a profound impact on shipping in the Red Sea. Israel attacked them just yesterday, and yet they continue to launch ballistic missile attacks every now and again. Most get intercepted, they aren't successful. The Yemen factor is intriguing in this. I mean, how does the end game begin to appear as far as Yemen is concerned without there actually being a deployment of ground forces? That's something nobody seems willing to do.
Well, I mean, that also represents another part of the complexity of this entire situation, Vishnu, because one of the after effects or one of the spillovers that we saw of the Hamas's attack on Israel was the return of piracy in the form of Houthis. You know, Houthi menace was pretty much controlled in the Red Sea. If you remember the maritime trade, of course, Yemen and Saudi Arabia and the Houthis there, they were concentrated in a different region, and there was bloodshed and everything going on there, and there was a very strong anti-Saudi Arabia sentiment because of what was happening in that part of Yemen, okay, that borders that region. But as far as the Red Sea is concerned, you know, you could see that our trade at least was going, that was the traditional route, the Suez Canal, Red Sea, you know, that was the traditional route. Also, there was a kind of a normalization which was underway, which had actually created space for, you know, frameworks like the I2U2 on the one hand and IMEC on the other hand. I mean, we talked about that with so much fanfare last year at G20. You know,
so what is the way forward as far as sorting out the Houthi issue is?
Yeah, so very quickly, I mean, I think the only one development that I've seen finally with respect to the Red Sea and Yemen is that for the first time, the Israelis have also sort of started targeting the Houthis. And it might have, you know, implications for maybe how the international, you know, maritime commerce is getting, I mean, helping it, getting it back, or, you know, escalating it or not, or, you know, trying to sort of take down the capabilities of the Houthis. One doesn't really know, because I don't think any answers would really exist in binaries, but I do have a sense that it is not in the interest of the great powers to let this conflict get out of hand, get into, you know, a full-fledged war, because of course, even if you look tactically speaking, if you look at where the American security assistance and its capabilities are concerned, I do not see the United States of America in a position to actually support Ukraine with billions and billions of worth of dollars, and then also support Israel against its, you know, the situation in the Middle East, and then also ready for its for a war in the Straits. So I think it would not really be in anybody's interest to let this actually go even further. Despite that, I think there are two factors. One is that is there a complete return of all the hostages, you know, back to Israel? That could be one thing. And because if you remember, until last year and earlier, you know, until this year.
And what is the second one? The second point.
The second one is that perhaps after the Israelis are able to sort of fend off the Houthi menace that UK and USA combined airstrikes have not been able to do, perhaps there would be some sort of a thing to sort of bring it down.
Ambassador Gupta, one final question to you. You know, the situation in the Red Sea is absolutely fraught. That's India's main, you know, one of India's main economic corridors. And yet the Indian Navy has maintained this very fine line. You're operating absolutely in harm's way, but you aren't willing to engage Houthi drones or Houthi missiles. You're just rendering assistance to ships in distress. at some stage that fine line, may end up being broken if you come under direct attack. But what do you see India's position with our maritime diplomacy being in the Red Sea?
Well, on maritime security, India's view has been to collaborate with other countries, act in concert to ensure safety of the sea lanes of communication. Because much of our trade flows through those channels. And therefore, it will be in our interest. But on the other hand, we also do not want to get involved in the conflict. You talked about the balance. I don't think we really look for any balance, but we have a principled approach. And that principled approach itself provides for the kind of balance that you're talking about. We do support Israel from the standpoint of no tolerance for terrorism. But we also support the Palestinian demand to have independence. And I think you asked, what could be the solution going forward? Is that the big countries have expressed concern. India is also concerned. I think all countries must put their mind together, work together in trying to craft a solution, a long-term solution. And I think some pressure has to be brought. Now, it's not easy to say that Netanyahu is beyond reprieve, beyond reproach, and nobody can put pressure. I don't think that is true. That is just an excuse for many large countries for not acting in the right manner. So I think the time has come. This already has escalated. And I think somebody should look at the human dimension. About 1 million, maybe that is an exaggeration, but a very large number of people, running into hundreds of thousands of people in Lebanon have been displaced. Hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza have been displaced. And mind you, in Israel also, there are close to about 100,000 people have been displaced. I've been to the northern Israel many times when I was posted there, Kiryat Shimona, and so many residents over there, they're not safe. Hundreds of people have been killed in Israel. So I think the people in Israel, I believe, are as much of a peace-loving people as people elsewhere.
Sure.
The mothers in Israel are not happy when their children, when their sons are getting killed in the northern Israel attacks. So I think they also pine for peace and security.
Sure.
And I think the question to ask is that a price which is justifiable, which the Israeli people are willing to pay?
All right, Ambassador, I'm just going to interrupt you now because we need to quickly move on. But I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. I spoke a little while earlier on to the new Israeli Consul General for the south of India, Ambassador Oli Weitzman. This is what she said. The sense many of us are getting is that this is a war that's ready to expand. There have been strikes, more strikes in Beirut. There have been strikes in Syria as well. There have been strikes in Houthi-held areas of Yemen. Would it be fair to say that, a larger war might be upon us?
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me this evening. I think you're asking the question, I think you're asking basically the wrong person. Israel, since the beginning of October, since the 8th of October, has been attacked repeatedly by Iran proxies, whether it was in the north, by Hezbollah, or from Yemen by the Houthis. And Israel is doing whatever it has to do in order to protect its citizens and make sure that citizens can return to their homes safely. Israel, of course, would like to do this diplomatically and would very much hope that both Hezbollah and other attackers stop attacking us and implement the 1701 UN resolution, which would basically